As Saddam Hussein reorganizes his government, President Bush warns that is not enough.
Normal relations with the United States cannot be affected with Saddam Hussein still calling the shots.
In Iraq today, people riot to get food. And in this country, your money, how to invest it amid recession and uncertainty.
This is NBC Nightly News, reported by Garrett Utley.
Good evening. Saddam Hussein, under pressure from inside and outside his country, made a move today to hold on to power. But what does it really mean? He announced a reorganization of his government in Baghdad. There's a new prime minister and also a new deputy prime minister. And now here's the catch to it all. These men were already prominent figures in the Iraqi government. And as far as we can tell this evening, Saddam Hussein remains firmly in control of his regime, if not his country. In Washington, Jamie Gangel reports on what happened and what the White House thinks of it all.
The White House says there are interesting shifts in the cabinet shuffle, but thus far President Bush sees no significant change.
I would simply say that Saddam Hussein appears to still be calling the shots.
Bush made the unusual Saturday appearance in the White House briefing room with visiting Turkish President Turgut Özal, here to discuss post-war diplomacy in the Middle East. Iraqi experts say they will watch to see if Saddam actually is desperate enough to make substantive reforms, but believe today's changes are just cosmetic. The titles may be new, but most of the faces are the same. Already in the cabinet, Sadoun Hamadi, a Shiite, now becomes prime minister. And Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz, a Christian, becomes deputy prime minister. On the surface, the moves may be an attempt to placate rebels, but in fact, both men have been close allies of Saddam for decades, and Saddam remains president, chairman of the Council of Ministers, commander-in-chief, chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council, and leader of the ruling Ba'ath Party.
I fail to see a great deal of significance in it. He has the same people in his entourage as he had before, with only the most minor changes. And if you don't change the players and you don't change the game, all you've done is reshuffled the cards in a sense.
What may make a difference are the rebel uprisings. In the south, rebels continue to fight but have been hit hard by the Iraqi army. In the north, Kurdish rebels appear to be doing better, in some areas claiming to have actually beaten back Saddam's forces. And there are also reports of sporadic clashes with government forces in Baghdad. No doubt some of their success can be attributed to pressure by the U.S. military, which has shot down Iraqi planes trying to go after the rebels.
I don't really know why they're doing that. There's no, we warned them, we gave them more than adequate warning.
While publicly, the White House continues to insist that it is not actively trying to overthrow Saddam Hussein, Garrick, I think it's fair to say this is a case of the gentleman doth protest too much. It appears across the board that's exactly what they're trying to do. Garrick?
Well, Jamie, General Colin Powell, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says that American troops will remain inside Iraq for many months to come. That's another way to keep the pressure on Saddam, isn't it?
Absolutely. General Powell has just said publicly what administration officials have been telling us privately, and that is whether through military intimidation, through economic sanctions, the U.S. government's going to do whatever they can to keep the pressure on.
But here's the hard part, Jamie. Does the White House think that Saddam can be driven from power in Baghdad without bringing the rebelling Shiites backed by Iran into power in Baghdad?
That's one question it seems no one has quite addressed yet, Garrick. Who is going to fill the vacuum? The rebels, the Shiites, the Kurds are not considered very favorably here, and some foreign policy experts think that President Bush has moved too hastily, that Saddam Hussein may actually be the best alternative. But the president said again today he will not normalize relations with Saddam Hussein.
All right, Jamie Gangel at the White House, thank you. And now a slice of life in southern Iraq. It happened today. It is about food and about people who do not have enough of it and what happens when it arrives and is finally handed out. Charles McLean shows us.
Iraqis caught in the middle. The people of the American-occupied town of Safwan are trapped between Saddam's Republican Guards to the north and the Kuwaiti border to the south. Most are hungry. Many are desperate. The U.S. 3rd Armored Division has come to their rescue, bringing food, basic medical care, and an organized system of distribution. Barbed wire fences were put up yesterday to define the perimeter of the relief center. And this morning, hungry Iraqis formed an orderly line, to receive standard Army MREs, meals ready to eat, and fresh fruit. But order turned to chaos at midday when a Saudi food truck pulled up next to the relief center.
Our Army, we've been distributing food in a somewhat orderly fashion. The Saudis just came up with the truck and it became a free-for-all. And I saw grown-ups taking food from children. And it just breaks your heart. It shouldn't happen. It doesn't need to happen. And I hope it never happens again.
The veterans of Operation Desert Storm were appalled. For many, today's incident at Safwan was a disturbing lesson in the consequences of war. Charles McLean, NBC News, Kuwait.
And in Kuwait itself, of course, there is still much suffering there. The oil well fires are still burning there. We know what that is doing to the environment. And now doctors are beginning to see what it is doing to people. Correspondent Deborah Roberts went on site to a hospital there to talk with doctors and the victims.
This is a springtime, and we used to enjoy sitting outside, but unfortunately we can't enjoy.
Outside Ahmadi Hospital in South Kuwait, oil fires and their ghastly smoke are just part of the scenery. They blacken the skies and threaten anyone who comes here to get well.
He's ill.
Why?
Because the air.
You see the smoke on his face. Dr. Dawood, you're seeing a lot of patients here complaining from coughing and sneezing.
Yeah, well, obviously these gases which are emitted from the burning wells do cause a lot of irritation.
My throat is not good.
The attacks are getting more frequent and more severe.
Inside the hospital's emergency room, children suffering. Skin rash.
The weather.
He can't breathe, too much coughing and don't breathe.
When they sneezing black, his ear black, their skin black. So they see more than the people living in Kuwait City.
So you give him nasal drops, and for now he's okay?
Yeah, for now he's okay.
Half the people have left Almaty to get away from the pollution. But even with a smaller population, doctors here at the hospital say their patient load is double. So you think he will be all right for now?
No, but later on, what's the effect for all of us? Nobody can know.
On site at Ahmadi Hospital, Deborah Roberts, NBC News, Kuwait.
And again, it could take several years to put out all of those oil well fires in Kuwait. As we cover our world this Saturday, this day, we'll be talking later in our program with Eduard Shevardnadze, the former Soviet foreign minister, talking about the danger of dictatorship in his country and what that could mean for us here at home. But next, here at home, tornado strike, there is much damage, several dead, and now there's the job of rebuilding. In parts of Kentucky and Tennessee through the night, a series of destructive tornadoes. At least 5 people were killed, dozens more were injured, and property damage, as you can see, was extensive. One area, that's McNairy County in Tennessee, was particularly hard hit. Reporter Stephen Lynn of NBC affiliate station WSMV in Nashville has more on what happened there.
2 or 3 tornadoes hopscotched across McNairy County last night, cutting a path 15 miles long, 2 football fields wide, killing at least 3 people, injuring 50 more, some seriously. The 250-mile-an-hour winds mowed down power lines, leaving nearly 25,000 people without electricity. The power cooperative here says they won't have the lines back up before Monday. Dozens of families lost their homes.
I've never seen anything so horrible in my life.
Well, we was on the roof square about this big, right over there.
Oh, God. I can't believe it.
The twisters blew apart both trailers and conventional homes, including the house Mitzi Mitchell has lived in for 13 years.
I thought it was about 5 or 6 of them. I said, Blake, it's really happening. It was like a dream for like a few seconds. I thought it was a dream.
The storm leveled the dreams of the Faust family. They opened an auto parts store on this lot 7 months ago after a fire destroyed their first building last year. Sean Faust and his cousins are searching for something to salvage from the mess since last night's storm sent Sean's father to the hospital.
What are you going to do?
I don't know. He said he's just going to sell this for scrap and probably sell a lot and do something else. I don't know what he's going to do.
Get out of the auto parts?
Yeah, he can get out of the auto parts business.
The storm damaged McNairy Central High School. All county schools will be closed until Wednesday. An emergency crews say it may take that long to clear away debris and open up the county's roads again. Stephen Lynn for NBC News, Selmer, Tennessee.
And here at home, a story of war and peace in the final chapter of a life of an American veteran. 22-year-old Anthony Riggs is his name. He survived the war in the Gulf, but not his return home to the United States. The Army specialist who helped man a Patriot missile battery was buried today, 5 days after being shot dead in a Detroit street. As one mourner put it, his death takes us from the elation of victory to the reality of urban streets. Riggs was the 128th person murdered in Detroit this year. 124 American soldiers were killed in action during the entire war. And on Focus this evening, investing your money. How? This past week, a painful reminder that what goes up can come down. After a big run-up, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell nearly 90 points. That's a 3% drop. And with disappointing corporate earnings, no one is sure where stock prices head next. So, what about leaving your money in the bank, you say? Well, troubling news there as well. Yields on certificates of deposit, that's CDs, fell this week to their lowest level in 3 years. That's putting the squeeze on savers. And Jeff Madrick has been looking into this and other questions. Good evening, Jeff.
Well, Garrick, there have been many casualties in this recession, but one rarely talked about is the saver. Now, some economists say even if there is a recovery soon, interest rates on savings will not return to where they once were. For those who have planned right, like these senior citizens at a fashion show in Smyrna, Georgia, retirement can indeed be the golden years. But even they are now feeling the cold draft of lower interest rates.
We have just drastically cut back on our spending in every way. I don't do quite a lot of things that we used to do.
And the stakes can go much higher.
You count on a certain amount of money, and then you don't have it anymore. I haven't had to move yet, but I may be in that position.
The average one-year bank CD paid 9.22% in April 1989. It is now down nearly 3 percentage points to 6.36%. That's a reduction of $1,500 a year for those with a $50,000 retirement nest egg.
He or she has received 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, even 16% for a brief moment. Those days are gone, in our judgment.
The implications are greater still for young married couples like Tracy Corman and Joan Shao, who are just starting to build their nest egg.
Well, I think in a few years we'd like to start a family and buy a home, hopefully. And so we'd like to think now how we can save for the future.
When I was in school and for the last couple of years, that's exactly where we had our money in CDs and money market accounts. And it was fine. It was an attractive rate. But it's not very attractive now.
And over time, that makes a big difference. Compounded over 20 years, a $10,000 investment earning 6% a year would come to nearly $33,000. At 8% a year, that same $10,000 would come to nearly $49,000, a difference of $16,000. The danger is that many who are hurting from lower interest rates are rushing into investments that are much riskier than they realize, such as buying long-term bonds for higher yields, but whose prices can fall sharply.
If you look in the newspapers, you'll see lots and lots of ads for bond funds, particularly for tax-exempt bond funds. There's nothing wrong with them if you know what you're doing.
The main point is investing just to keep up is now likely to get tougher.
I don't think we trust ourselves to make some of those decisions.
The savings rates are down, borrowing costs are not. So one of the best investments you can make is to pay off your credit card debts and consumer loans. The interest rates are very high, and the payments are no longer tax deductible. Garrett?
Oh, good advice, Jeff. Now, younger people can generally afford to take a greater risk than their parents can. What should they be doing that their parents shouldn't be doing?
I cannot stress enough that CD rates and Treasury bills for the last 12 years were even good for young people. They were unusually high for a lot of peculiar reasons that won't repeat themselves. Young people now have the big advantage. They can look 10 and 20 years out. So they can buy stocks. They can't, utility stocks, for example, paying 9% dividends. They can buy long-term bonds. They have the big advantage if they don't need money right away.
Well, some people say the recession will be over in the next few months. Interest rates go back up. Why worry? You laugh.
Yes, I do. Don't count on the recession being over. But I think people who have CD rates have to start looking at maybe intermediate term bonds, 2 to 4 years. Not a big risk there of the price going down if interest rates go up, and you can get a better yield. There are some things you can do.
All right, Jeff Madrick, thanks very much. And we'll have more news as we continue here in just one moment. And now a story of sports and race and South Africa. For years, that country has been barred from international sports competition. Everyone knows the reason why: apartheid policies. South Africa has not participated in the Olympic Games since 1960. Well, now apartheid, as we know, is easing somewhat. And today, the International Olympic Committee sent a delegation to South Africa to see whether enough there has changed to allow that country back into the Olympic Games. In Johannesburg, here's Robin Lloyd.
Sports in South Africa are taking the lead in casting aside many old apartheid structures. Shakili Nzimande setting new records in South Africa in the 200-meter event and giving blacks new prominence in the white-dominated world of sports here. Like all other South African athletes, Nzimande is barred from Olympic competition. That may soon change. The Olympic delegation that arrived today will review the ban on South Africa's participation in the Games. Commission members say they're open-minded. Olympic medal winner Edwin Moses, a member of the delegation.
I never thought that I would even be here in South Africa to even discuss these type of issues for a very long time. So, of course, that gives me room for optimism.
But full integration in sports here is not yet a reality. Blacks and whites are competing with each other more and more. But South Africa is still in the process of trying to form a non-racial Olympic sporting organization, a key demand of the African National Congress. The ANC wants to move cautiously.
The ideal situation, would be one, in which there is no rushing, because the impression might be left that the whole drive around integration is merely just to get to those Olympic Games.
But the white government has made strides to end apartheid and has promised to dismantle it completely within the next few months. And despite the ANC's reservations, many athletes here believe South Africa's readmission into the Olympic fold may be a real possibility when the full International Olympic Committee meets in June to decide this issue. Robin Lloyd, NBC News, Johannesburg.
In the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev has an idea for those Soviet republics which want independence, the republics, that is, there are about half a dozen of them. He said today that they should be like the former East European satellite nations. That is, they should have their own governments but still be under Moscow's firm control. He said that in an interview with a German magazine, and it's not likely to make the growing opposition movement in the Soviet Union very happy. One of the important voices for freedom there is Eduard Shevardnadze, the former foreign minister. You recall he resigned in anger a couple of months ago, warning of a coming dictatorship. Well, today I talked with him in Moscow and asked whether that danger of dictatorship is still there.
The threat continues. I've already said this repeatedly, in fact, after my first statement. Such a threat remains.
If the situation were to get worse, if there were to be a dictatorship in the Soviet Union, what would that mean for the relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States?
You know, if dictatorship comes, this will be a tragedy. This would mean really a civil war, bloodshed, and I will clearly say that the appearance of a dictatorship will also be a tragedy for other countries, and that includes also the United States. Then of what kind of new world order can we talk about? What new relations can exist? Because everything that has been done, and historical steps have been taken, but all this then will have to be cancelled, and we simply cannot allow this.
How close are we to that happening, in your opinion, today, Mr. Shevardnadze?
I still think that the people will not wish to live in conditions of dictatorship and will not wish to go back to the old order.
Mr. Shevardnadze, when you talk with Mikhail Gorbachev in Moscow, what is your impression of him today? You know him so well for so many years. How he is holding up? Does he feel that he is the master of events? Does he ever feel discouraged?
You know, how can we say it? He understands the difficulties, the complexities that we have to face at this stage of the development of our society and the development of the perestroika process. And the difficulties of the whole situation. But he believes that there's a good chance, there's a real potential to save the country and to save perestroika and democracy.
Mr. Shevardnadze in Moscow, thank you for being with us this evening. And I'll have some final thoughts in just a moment. And finally this evening, this item. For more than a year now, the marriage and divorce of Donald and Ivana Trump have been the subject of much gossip and sometimes even a bit of news. As reported this past week, if you noticed it, the two finally reached a settlement for their divorce. She gets $10 million in cash, an apartment in Manhattan, a mansion in Connecticut, and the use of an even bigger mansion in Palm Beach, Florida for 1 month each year, plus $300,000 a year in child support, which, if you have your calculator handy, averages out to $100,000 per child per year. Not bad for the children. He keeps the rest of his fortune, much of which is in these present days in hock to the banks. Now, why is this news today? Well, last night at midnight in New York City in a lawyer's office, a check from Mr. Trump was handed over to Mrs. Trump, the $10 million, a check now cash in the bank, which means that the story of the Trumps is finally finished, over, ended, period, never again to grace the covers of gossip tabloids in the supermarkets or even an occasional network newscast. That, no doubt, will come as a relief to the Trumps and perhaps for the rest of us, too. And that is our look at our world this day. I hope you'll join us tomorrow. Eric Utley. Good night for NBC News.
Coming up next on the scene at 6, daylight reveals the destruction